go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Disability Voices United SDP Connect. My name is Christiana Morales. I am the director of SDP here at DVU. And we have a great, exciting presentation to talk about today. I'm really excited about it. We have a couple announcements. First, I'm going to go through and give me 1 second to share my screen here. And the first one is we have a new monthly meeting, and it's for people who are brand new to self-determination, really don't know anything about it, or somebody who just wants to come and get inspired. And what it is on the first Friday of every month, it's at noon. We kind of think of it like a little lunch group, and we're just there to talk about what self-determination lives look like. So it's people in self-determination sharing their stories, and we will put the link down in the chat for you if you're interested in coming. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And our next announcement is our very own Gilda Giron.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gilda Giron. I'm the Director of Outreach and Leadership Training at Disability Voices United. And I'm really excited to tell you all about our upcoming in-person conference called A Matter of Race and Place, Building Fair Policies for Californians with Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. It's on November 8th of this year at the Endowment Center in Los Angeles. And this one-day event will focus on addressing racial, ethnic, and geographic disparities or unfairness in the systems that serve people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in California. For decades, Californians with IDD and their families have reported discrimination based on who they are and where they live. And data has shown that people of color and those in certain areas face delays in diagnosis, greater educational segregation, fewer regional center services, and worse health outcomes. And so our conference is going to aim to tackle these issues by bringing together people with IDD, their families, advocates, researchers, and professionals to identify barriers and develop solutions. And this event will include some keynote panels and breakout sessions. And after the conference, we'll create and share a report with our recommendations. And it's important to note that this is not a regional center vendored event. If you're a self-advocate or family member and need help with the cost, you can reach out to your regional center service coordinator. And for those in the self-determination program, you can ask your FMS to pay for the conference if it's in your spending plan. And we're also working on securing enough sponsorships to offer scholarships for those who might need financial assistance. And this is a really, it's a unique opportunity really to bring together everyone, even for those most affected by these issues, and to work on the real change that that's needed. And so if you're interested in learning more, they shared the conference DVU website link in the chat. And we hope you can join us and be part of this important event. Thank you. Thank you, Christiana.
Thanks, Gilda. So if you haven't been around Disability Voices United for a while, we have been working on some bills, and there are two key ones we're going to be talking, actually three we're going to be talking about today. And so I'm going to share my screen, but before I do that, I did want to introduce everyone to you. First, I want to start with Fernando Gomez. He is the co-founder of Integrated Community Collaborative. Say hi, Fernando. There he is. We have Judy Mark, the president of Disability Voices United. There's Judy. And Nina Spiegelman, who is our director of policy here at Disability Voices United. And we're going to be talking about the bills. Give me 1 second to share my screen here. There we go. Okay, so these are our updates on legislation, and the purpose of our legislation is to improve the self-determination program and transparency with the regional centers. And so let's get started. Judy, I think you are up.
I am. Hi, everybody. Great to see you all. We really appreciate your support on the legislation that we have moving forward, and they're all of them are in their very final stages. And so you're going to get a lot of information about them today and also ways that you can be helpful. So the first bill we're going to talk about is Assembly Bill 1147, the Disability Equity, Transparency, and Accountability Act of 2024. It used to be called the Act of 2023, but it is now, it's taken us a long time to get the bill passed. So now we're in a new year. It's authored by Assemblymember Dawn Addis, who represents the San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara area. In case any of you are from that part of the world, she has been an incredible author for us, and co-sponsored by Disability Voices United and the Integrated Community Collaborative. And you'll hear from both of our organizations today. So let me tell you a little bit about AB 1147. Next slide, please. So AB 11, for those of you who have been part of DVU and have been supportive of AB 1147 in the past, I want to just preface this discussion by saying the bill is much, much smaller than the original bill that we introduced. It is for a range of reasons. Reason number one is that last year, when we were trying to get the bill passed, there were certain provisions around equity and data keeping that ended up getting pulled out of our bill and put into the state budget and became law in the state budget. So that's already happened, many of those provisions. Then there were many other provisions that we had in this bill. And at the end of last year, not the end of last calendar year, the end of the last legislative cycle, which is the end of September of 2023, there were some concerns expressed about the bill. And so the author, Assemblymember Addis, decided to put a pause on the bill. And what that's called in legislative world, it's called making the bill inactive. So the bill still exists. It's still a bill that you could eventually get passed the next year. But at that point, it was just be put on hold. So the ICC and DVU have spent much of this calendar year, starting in January, negotiating with various groups and agencies and departments to figure out a way to get support for this bill to get it to pass. At the same time that we were doing this, many of you know that the master plan began. So the master plan on developmental services, which we've talked about in this setting and in other settings, started its process in March. And they are taking up many of the issues that we are discussing, that we had in our bill. But some of the issues that are not being discussed by the master plan have remained in the bill, and it is what we are pushing forward. And so what remains in the bill and will get passed either tomorrow or Friday on the Senate and Assembly floors, and it will head to the governor's desk, are the provisions we're about to tell you about, that we're going to tell you about right now. And the main part of the bill that remains is related to making regional centers subject to the Public Records Act. What is the Public Records Act? Well, the Public Records Act is a law that already exists that requires all governmental agencies to be transparent, to provide information to the public when requested, that is not private, such as data, such as policies, so that the public understands how their government monies are being spent. So because regional centers are not governmental agencies, they in fact are independent nonprofits. they are not subject to the Public Records Act. However, they are not, it is not unprecedented for an independent nonprofit to be subject to the Public Records Act. And in fact, there are agencies, there are groups called charter schools. If any of you have heard of a charter school, they are generally separate nonprofits that run a school. Sometimes they're for-profits, but that run a school that is considered an option for people with for people who don't want to go to their public school. So what AB 1147 will do is it will require regional centers to provide information when requested within 10 days, just like all government agencies are. And we make this argument of why regional centers should be subject to the PRA in this way: that regional centers distribute almost $15 billion in taxpayer funds, both state and federal taxpayer funds. They distribute these funds through services provided directly to people with developmental disabilities, as well as funds, as well as operations funds to run the regional center. So since they are responsible for distributing so many public funds, they should have the maximum amount of transparency and to be able to provide us with information that we need. The other thing that I can say when comparing them to charter schools who are subject to the Public Records Act is that charter schools are an option for people who don't want to go to their local public school. But with regional centers, it is our only option. If you are a person with a developmental disability, it's not like you can go to the county and get your services, but as an alternative, you can go to the regional center. You only have the regional center to give you your services. They are our only option, and therefore they should be subject to the same transparency laws that governmental agencies are subject to. I also just want to make a note that private information is absolutely protected as part of the Public Records Act law that applies to all government agencies. So that means that no one can request from the regional center to see an individual's IPP or to find out about information about a staff member or to see litigation that a regional center is involved in. Anything that would be considered private, and the list goes on in the hundreds. There are hundreds of specific private points that regional centers would be able to not make public. So you do not need to worry about private information being put out there publicly. But what would we want to get information about? We would want to get data. We would want how many people within your regional center are receiving a specific kind of service. How many people are receiving supported living versus independent living. You could ask about internal policies. Like many regional centers have these sort of clinical teams, or I call them sort of secret teams that often make decisions about whether individuals can get services or not. You cannot ask them, why did you not give a service to this individual? You can't ask them that. What you can say is, what are the policies that have been developed in this clinical team or this purchase of service team? What are the policies you've developed to be able to give them to be able to decide who gets services and who doesn't get services? So the Public Records Act, or PRA, is sort of the main part of AB 1147 that remains. But there are a couple of other parts as well, and I'm going to hand it over now with the next slide to Fernando Gomez.
Thank you, Judy. And for the Integrated Community Collaborative, it's definitely a pleasure. And of course, this as sister organizations to be able to introduce this type of legislation. Many of us remember that legislation that was introduced just last year in regards to reforming the fair hearing process. Well, this is in alignment with those efforts to be able to address systemically, the system as a whole and to improve on it. So as Judy was sharing, we believe that a Public Records Act will improve the system overall in both sides of the ledger, not just be able to, for us as community and individuals served by the system, to be able to access information, data that's really important, but also for the system to improve on its process, if you will. And this item that I'm going to be talking about is the conflict of interest policies. It talks to certain elements within the system that historically has not been addressed, if you will. There's a lot of familiarity. There's a lot of nepotism. There's a lot of engagement, if you will, with whether it's through the, service providers or other elements that impact the regional center. So we said, okay, let's take a step back and let's look at prohibiting the regional center employees from accepting gifts at, $15 from service providers, consumers, or family members. This way, there is not a bias or there is not a construed effort to say, hey, I just gave you a trip to Hawaii and you're going to be able to give me all these services, right? You just want to be able to eliminate all of that kind of stuff. So we feel that by prohibiting and creating a standard as far as the amount that can be awarded will be very beneficial. The other is nepotism, especially for senior staff. Historically, we've seen a lot of that. And it's an area that we're looking that we have to have a policy that addresses nepotism, where you can't hire family members, and that has to be looked a little bit more closely. Okay. And I think we can move forward to the next slide, Judy.
Yes. The next slide is Nina.
Okay. All right. Well, as Judy said, and I know so many of you out there have helped us with 1147 last year. This started out, 1147 started out life as an enormous bill, a real comprehensive change, looking for a comprehensive reform of the system. Pieces have gone over, in the budget process to other parts of the Lanterman Act, at least the concepts. And again, in this round, even though we don't have the, sweeping provisions, part of the, the landscape we are in now has, the landscape is now dominated by the master plan for developmental services. And it's very, very clear that is where the action is. And again, DVU and the ICC are major players in that. And but what 1147 does have in it, which is actually, I think, can prove to be very significant, hopefully if it passes, is that in the existing, right, as part of earlier trailer bill, the requirement to do the master plan, establishing the master plan, is in the Lanterman Act. And so what 1147 would amend that section to require HHS to, in the master plan process, to solicit input from a broad range of subject matter experts, including and topics, including well, that can include, but this is highlighted right almost directly out of the prior 1147, which is the issues such as regional center board of directors accountability and transparency, and the evaluation of regional centers, including performance, equity, and diversity. Those are right out of the areas of our prior bill. So it highlights these things, and it couldn't come, the end of the season couldn't come at a better time, because this would really be great to have as we go through the master plan process. And again, we're going to now go to our next bill. But before we leave, I just want to thank everybody again. This has been such a slog, but it's been, we really, really need your support. And the Public Records Act and the other requirements, the ones Fernando was talking about, but the Public Records Act is such, it is the key provision out there. It is, to see what the what the government is doing. It's the state version of the Freedom of Information Act, and it just would be so significant. So we really hope you can get out there and send in the letters and make the calls, and we'll talk about that later. But next up, I think, is Christiana.
So we don't want to confuse you, but we have 3 different bills we're going to be talking about. So we're finishing up with 1147, and we're going to start right now talking about Senate Bill 1281. This is the one that's on advancing equity and access to the Self-Determination Program Act. And I know we've talked about it here at Connect before. It's authored by Senator Caroline Menjivar. She actually, I think, came and spoke at one point at one of our Connects, and co-sponsored by Disability Voices United and Integrated Community Collaborative. We're going to go into the details of it now to tell you what's in here.
Okay, so let me unmute myself, but I just can't say enough great things about Senator Menjivar. She really is a joy to work with, but she really truly gets our community. She has the heart and the spirit for our community, and I believe that she is a family member of an individual served by the system. So she has experienced firsthand a lot of the challenges, if you will. And as we move into self-determination, we know that there are options, right? The traditional system's not going to go away. We're going to fix it. We're going to help fix it as best possible. And that's one of the major undertakings of the master plan. But also self-determination gives us the opportunity to create an option that's viable. My son, 33 years into the program, is life-changing. So we know, as many of you do, that it works. But we also have to learn from what we've experienced in the last 50-something odd years through the traditional system, especially when it comes to equity. We know that there are a lot of issues, a lot of challenges, a lot of barriers, a lot of roadblocks, and we have to be really careful that those don't migrate over into this new program. So one of the main goals of 1281 is to make sure that DDS continues to look through the lens of equity and make sure that it takes measurable improvements towards achieving equity in both outreach, program promotion, and do it, by everyone, no person left behind, especially by race, ethnicity, and the regional center that's in the program, the whole geographic area. That in itself, it's a huge effort, but it's something that I know that we're putting a lot of effort into, and we believe that this bill with Senator Menjivar will help address equity as it comes to self-determination. Judy, was there anything else that you wanted me to expand on?
That was excellent.
Okay.
So let's get into some of the details to back up what Fernando just said. We've done this we've put them in categories according to the 5 principles of self-determination. So the first is freedom. And so what the bill does, actually everything in there is about freedom, but one of the things that the bill does is it ensures and puts into law that participants have the right to pick their own services, providers, and the types of items or goods that they want to purchase. This is kind of a very big deal to have this put in law, because even though it's implied in many parts of the self-determination law, we are now being very explicit about it. It also specifically says that the regional centers must respect the choices that people are making. So what can't happen is a regional center would say, are you sure you really want to take that dance class? Or are you sure that this is the staff you want to hire. They have to respect the choices you make, just like people who are not who do not have disabilities, who should have their choices respected in their lives. Another big provision that it touches on is that the goods and services in the spending plan do not have to be the same goods and services that you got in the traditional system that made up your individual budget. So not most regional centers don't do this, but there are still some that specifically say, oh, you put behavioral services in your budget you have behavioral services as part of the traditional system to put in your budget. You should be putting in behavioral services in your spending plan. That direct line will no longer exist. What you can say is, oh, well, we put behavioral services in the budget because there are some goals that we would like to meet. Let's say there are goals of, reducing anxiety or goals of improving communication. And so to meet those goals, you may decide you want behavioral therapy. That's completely fine. But you may also decide that you want to do horseback riding because it calms yourself. It reduces your anxiety. Or you may want to have a communication partner who will help you spell to communicate and let people understand what it is that you want and need in your life. So that direct line will no longer, it will be prohibited, even though we don't believe that direct line ever really existed in current law, but now we've made it very, very clear. So am I the next one as well?
I think I'm the next one.
Oh, no, I think I am. And
Okay.
you're 10 and 11. Yeah. So let me just do this one real quick. So the second is authority. The second principle is authority. And we focus this on FMSs, or financial management services. We know that many of you talk a lot about concerns you have about FMSs. So some of what we've done in this legislation is made it so that FMSs can actually do their jobs better, to put less burden on the FMS. And in some cases, we've also said, but FMSs, you better freaking be doing your jobs. So the first provision I want to tell you about is that it requires regional centers to send the spending plans that they have reviewed, as well as the purchase of service or POS authorizations. They need to send those to the FMSs in a prompt manner so that you don't hear all the time from your FMS, oh, geez, I would love to do that, but I did not get the authorization from your regional center yet. So that we're hoping that this provision will take care of that problem. The second provision is that a lot of FMSs say that they will receive a request from a participant to let's say purchase a laptop computer or an iPad to communicate, or support socks or whatever it is. And they feel obligated to go back to the regional center to say, are you good with this? Even though it's specifically written out in the spending plan. And so that slows everything down. And a lot of people say they feel like FMSs are starting to act like regional centers because they're starting to say what you can and cannot do with the funds in your spending plan. So what this says is FMSs, you can make these purchases and you don't have to go back to the regional center to ask any questions because it's in the spending plan that has already been reviewed. And so what it does is it protects FMSs to say, look, this is in law. I didn't have to ask you, and so you need to reimburse us for these funds that we just put out to purchase this item. The final piece is really, really important. So this pertains to people who are in the sole employer model only. And we know that many FMSs out there are no longer taking co-employer model cases. And if you don't know the difference between sole employer or co-employer, we're not really talking about that today. But DVU has done many, many SDP Connects on that. And please look at our YouTube channel and find those sessions where we have explained the differences. So we're talking about people who are on the sole employer model, where the employer of record is usually the self-determination participant. And one of the concerns people have expressed is that if an FMS kind of screws up and doesn't pay the employees in a timely way, which is required by California state law, that if there are any financial penalties that are imposed, that it is paid for by the FMS, not by the participant. And so this is designed, this provision, to protect the participant, to understand that if it is the fault of the FMS, that the FMS needs to pay any financial penalties that may exist. All right, now I'm passing it back to you, Christiana.
Okay, now I'm going. The next one that we really looked at was support. And we're focusing on clarifying those rights of participants to choose your support, right? And one of the things that we get a lot of pushback, which is interesting because it's in the DDS frequently asked questions on their website, the FAQs, that you don't have to have a specific provider name and you don't have to know the exact dollar amount. And yet we're still having issues with regional centers and some financial management services that are insisting upon those things. So we decided to codify it, put it in the law saying, nope, those are things that do not have to be. So you'll put a description of something, but not a specific provider name. And then the last one is really interesting. So every regional center has what they have called purchase of service standards. And these are the rules that that regional center has around a specific service code. So an example is if you think about social recreation, it varies radically between the different regional centers. So one regional center might say you can have one social rec per year, and one might say you can have 2 per year, and one might say you can have as many as you want. So it varies by regional center. So those rules will apply to your budget when you're creating your budget, because remember that budget is based on traditional system services. However, when you get to your spending plan and self-determination program, those rules no longer apply. Those rules were for service codes of traditional services. So that means that if you believe that social rec, if you spent all of your budget on social rec to meet your goals, you have the right to do that. So that's really what this is talking about, that sometimes we hear that some of the regional centers are mixing up that those purchase of service rules they have also apply to self-determination, and they do not, because we have our own service codes in self-determination. So I'm going to go to our next slide. And then responsibility. And I think this is the one that I see as really important. We're not significantly changing what's in the law. What the law listed was that the regional center would review a spending plan. They don't approve it, they review it. And they look to see that the items in the spending plan are that generic resources are being used first, which is the same rule from the traditional system, which, this is Medicaid money that we need to follow these rules, and that the services are federally reimbursable, meaning that they're part of those service codes that are listed for self-determination, and that they get reimbursed by the government for some of these things. So those are the two things they should be looking for. What's happening right now is we see regional centers that are reviewing a lot more things than that. They have expanded beyond it. And so what their argument would be, well, the law said that we could review this, but it didn't say we couldn't review anything else. And so we decided that it's important to specify that when they are reviewing them, they are only reviewing that they are generic resources, that their generic resources are used first, and that the services are federally reimbursable. So it's just clarifying to everybody. So everybody's on a level playing field. So we get back to equity. Everybody needs to have the same rules. And then finally, that this to me is the biggest one, and I think it's going to make the biggest impact on everybody. And if you look at how the service codes are in self-determination, that we have a ton of service codes, but they are broken into these three main categories. And right now, the regional centers create a purchase of service, and I like to think of it like they're giving you a line of credit. So they for each one of those service codes, they're saying we're giving an authorization to spend this amount of money for each service code. Now, this becomes a problem when you want to move money around, because even if you're moving 10 cents between two service codes, they have to think of it like closing an account, adjust the funds, and reopen it for every single movement. So if you're in self-determination and you have had delays when you're trying to do a spending plan update, that's why. If you're having delays in trying to get your funding sent in, that's why, because they have to do so many of these purchase of services. So what we're asking is instead of all those individual ones, they assign a purchase of service for the three main categories, and all the service codes underneath those categories, you could then move money between without them having to close and open those accounts. So that means we'll have so much more fluidity within your spending plan. And what I'm hearing from the community is because it's so hard to move money, we're losing employees, or we're losing providers because something was paid late and we couldn't move money to get it over there. And so we want to make sure that everything can get paid for. We can move money around. I like to think about it. If it took me 2 months to move money from my overdraft account into my checking account, I would be in a world of hurt. And that's kind of what we're doing right now in self-determination. So this is a really big piece, and we think it's going to relieve the stress on everybody involved. It will benefit the regional centers because the burden on their accounting department is huge right now. It's going to release the stress for the financial management services and for participants. So to me, this is a really big one. Now I'm going to hand it over to Fernando.
Thank you, Christiana. So you talked about support, and you talked about the responsibilities. So let's talk a little bit about confirmation and self-determination and how SB 1281 will help address that. We know, I mean, I'm a father of 2 individuals served by the regional center system. And I got to tell you, it's challenging. Life is challenging to begin with, but when you're navigating the regional center system, it just kind of puts a pit in my stomach knowing that I have to try to figure it out. In many cases, it's just way too overwhelming. What we've seen traditionally is a system of compliance versus what the Latterman Act promises, and it's based on as far as being person-centered, and here again, equity for all of us. So confirmation talks to the consistency across the state in every regional center catchment area to assure that there is equity, that it's equitable. And I know for me as a dad, time is of essence, time is essential, time is crucial. And I don't have the luxury of transitioning my son a year later into a program that I know would benefit him immediately. So why can't we not transition in 60 days or less? Why are we looking at some of the elements that the traditional system has impacted our ability to access services in a person-centered way and make sure that we address them? We need to reduce the racial and geographic disparities by creating consistency across every of the 21 regional center catchment areas, 21 regional centers. So what we're looking to do is require DDS to simplify it. There is no reason that you have to have a doctorate degree in order to try to figure out the program, right? Let's just simplify it. It required easy to follow processes for all of the participants statewide to be able to enroll, to be able to set your individual budgets, how your spending plans and the selective services supports and the FMSs that are part of the program, as to what Christiana just shared with us. So we're looking at that consistency so that individuals like my son who has Down syndrome, right? If he's in LA, he has Down syndrome, and he's in San Francisco, he still has Down syndrome. That doesn't change. So why does the system change when you're in a different geographic area? There needs to be consistency, and we're looking to make sure that it's put into its right place. Thank you. And
Nina's next. Go ahead, Nina.
Nina.
Okay, sorry, I was getting messages. So here we have, we sponsored another bill. It's basically a one sentence, but I think it's going to be a great bill. It's SB 1463, authored by Senator Nilo from the Sacramento area. And it addresses the creation of a DDS Deputy Director of Self-Determination. And if we go to the next slide, we can see in that one sentence, it's got a lot of good stuff in there. So this would be a governor appointed position. So it's a very high level position at the Department of Developmental Services. And this is my favorite part of this little bill, and that is the Deputy Director for Self-Determination would be responsible for overseeing the successful implementation and operation of the SDP. And to me, that elevates the importance of the SDP, like right there, by having that is a governor appointed high level position, and who's, basically when it's time for their job evaluation, one of the, they've got to show that that the program is getting successfully implemented to get, to be considered to be doing a good job. So I kind of love that. The Deputy Director would report directly to the DDS Director, and the appointment will require Senate confirmation. So I think, are we at the mechanics now?
Yes.
All
Go ahead.
right. Okie doke. So like we've said, we're going to need to have these bills these are not a slam dunk by any means, except for, well, 1463 has already passed. 1463 is already there, and that is likely, that probably will get signed. But there's, 1147 and 1281 need a push. So here's how you can support these bills. So for individuals, now, did you want me to focus on yes. So click on contact at the top of, are you referring to that, Judy, in the sample letters that we have?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Did you want me to share my screen and walk people through this one?
Yes, that would be great.
I did find it. I did find it easily at the gov.ca thing, but we can do that.
Give me 1 second. Let me bring it up here. Okay.
Now, do we have, I did not notice it. Do we have another slide for organizations, or is just for individual? This is, we're talking about, this is for individuals' letters to be submitted. When you can, we have a sample letter, but please, if you have a moment, I mean, the most important thing is getting it in, getting it in. But if you want to put your individual story, why this is important to you personally, that is great. We don't want it to just be a million of the exact same, although numbers matter, and that, whatever you can do would be very appreciated. So here, if you scroll up, Christiana, where it says, okay, so here we want to, great. And okay, so we have here, an you can check on an active bill, and that should come up. Our bills are not listed. There's a whole list of bills here. These are bills that are already on the governor's desk. Except for, let's see if 1463 is there yet.
It just passed today, so it's doubtful.
Oh, it just passed today, so probably not. What I just want to say that, according to our wonderful consultant who's following this so closely, both both of our bills should come up tomorrow, and then we'll go back to the houses. It's a many round process. We don't know yet when it will be done, but it's got to be done by Saturday. So, once our bills are there, so this, I'm assuming that starting next week, you would go here, click on the bill that you need, and then you leave a comment. And then what you would do is you would copy the email, our sample letter, with your personal touches in it, and paste it in this, and then submit.
Well, first, what you want to do is click on Pro, which Christiana just did. Pro means you're in favor of a bill.
Oh, yes.
Means
you support this bill.
Right. So say Pro, and then I would also change the message subject line to the words, support AB 1147. Okay.
Yes.
So we're not going to submit this right now, obviously, but there are a couple. Let's go back to the slides, because while Nina was speaking and you were sharing the other screen, I actually updated the slide because I messed up that I didn't talk about organizations. So we may need to download the slides again, staff, and put it back in the chat because of this little screw up of mine. Okay, so Christiana, if you could go back and start on 15. So organizations have a different route that they can take. They can email to a very specific email address called leg.unit@gov.ca.gov, and you put it on your organizational letterhead, and you can email it directly to them. You can also call, by the way. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to give you some good little hints on things. So Nina, let's just stay together and we can just talk back and forth. So for things that you're putting in writing, you need to send the email or put your position on the portal individually for each of the bills. You can't say them all at once, because they won't see it, or they won't distinguish between the different bills. So we put in the chat sample letters. If you are on DBU's mailing list, which you absolutely should be, if you are not, if one of the staff could put the link to how to get on our mailing list. But if you are on our mailing list, we will be sending this out repeatedly over the next couple of weeks. So we've given you sample letters, but you need to make these letters your own, because we have little parts of them that show, like, add your name here. So if you don't actually read what we've given you and just send it in, it will look really weird, because you have to add your name, and it really would be good to make it, at least just the first paragraph, a little bit personal. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit about calling. Now, you can also call the governor's office if that is easier for you. We are giving you the phone number. What happens is that you press 1 for English, or maybe you don't have to press anything for English. I can't remember. I think you probably press 2 for Spanish, but they have both Spanish and English. And then then they start speaking, saying, if you would like to leave a message for the governor, press a specific number, 6. And therefore you can just leave a message and say, hi, my name is Judy Mark, and I support AB 1147, and I hope that the governor signs it. Hang up. It's that easy. You can also speak to a real person if you just hold on the phone. And they're very nice, and they say governor's office, and you say, and you can say, I want the governor to sign the following bills. So with phone calls, you can give them all 3 bills at the same time. You do not need to make 3 separate phone calls. You can, by the way, call every day if you want. So something that you should know about when we got the self-determination law passed back in 2013, our friend David Oster helped us get that law passed by calling the governor's office many times every single day. Many of us do not have time to do that, but it actually really helps when you do that. So you can call, you can send an email through the portal, you can send a snail mail letter. You can do all of those things, and you can do them many different times. So what ends up happening with the governor is that they print out for him all of the list of calls. They have, we received 1,495 phone calls in support of the bill, and he takes that into account as he's making his decision. You can start making the phone calls right now. You can't leave anything on the portal yet until the bill finally passes, which at the latest it'll be Saturday. It's most likely to be midnight on Friday night because it's a 3-day weekend and the legislature wants to go home. So I know that Lisa was asking when is the last day for this. So the governor must sign or veto the bills by September 30th. We have no idea if he's going to sign or veto our bill the day after he gets it, or he's going to wait all the way until the last minute on September 30th. If I had to guess, it's going to be way at the end. It's going to be because every bill we've ever gotten passed has always been the September 29th or September 30th. So this is not a high priority bill. It's not going to be one that he's going to do a press conference about. None of these bills are. So he's going to put this on the back burner and wait until the end. So, and for the letter via email, it's only for organizations. So if you represent an organization, you can start sending that right now. But the portal is not going to be available until the bill is actually on the governor's desk, which should be for sure by next week. They'll have it all set up. Okay, next slide, please. I think it might be the end. Yay. So that is our presentation. We can stop sharing screen. I have noticed a million questions in the chat and a couple of hands raised. So you take it away, Christiana.
So I just want to let everybody know the way we do questions is we will alternate between the raised hands and the questions in the chat. We'll read out the questions from the chat so they will get interpreted. So let's start with Cecilia. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hola, buenas tardes. Gracias por permitirme dar una opinión y una pregunta. Tengo una pregunta. Estuve viendo sus videos y tocó que hoy mismo fue el tema de los 5 principios de autodeterminación. Mi hijo es su 4º año del programa de autodeterminación y todo ha estado bien hasta hace 4 años, pero ahora la gerente de autodeterminación del centro regional de mi hijo está tomando represalias con él por la abogacía de su mamá, o sea, yo. ¿Qué se puede hacer ahí? Porque, pues, ella tiene el poder, ella está manipulando el equipo de mi hijo y ella es la gerente la que firma el presupuesto y dice que pues, si no me parece, pues, vamos a ir a una audiencia. En ese caso, ¿qué se puede hacer? Ya que, pues, mi hijo cumple con todos los reglamentos de autodeterminación, sus códigos están bien, pero simplemente no lo firman y ya para el 1 de septiembre tenía que estar su nuevo presupuesto y se entregó todo bien, todo iba bien. Simplemente al llegar a ella a firmarlo, me acaban de avisar ayer y hoy que no, que está en revisión y que no saben si lo van a firmar y que pues tengo que esperar.
So Judy, do you want me to take this one or? So you don't have to wait. You're saying that your rollover date is September, the end of September, that we'll see. So there cannot be a gap in service. they cannot have a gap in service. So they have to either sign your budget or extend the current one until they can agree to it. So I would absolutely get the ombudsperson's office involved immediately, because and start copying them in all of your emails, because they cannot have that gap. And then if it continues, I would also file 1147 a complaint, because it's illegal. It's against your son's civil rights to have a gap in service. So those are two things I would do immediately. I will say, while the ombudsperson's office don't do a lot, having them copied on this tends to get them moving and get things unstuck. So those would be the two places I would start. But they absolutely can't have a gap in service for you. That goes against the regional center laws. So we have a question in the chat, and it was from Janelle at 454. Can you please give an example of what the anti-nepotism policy might encompass? Is it in the hiring of family members as regional center staff or providers or both? Thank you.
I'm happy to take that one. It is not about being a provider. It is only about working at the regional center. So you should know, so first of all, let me redefine what nepotism means. So nepotism is when a person is the head of a company or the head of an agency, and they hire their family members to keep sort of more money flowing into their family. In many government agencies, it is considered illegal to hire family members to work if you're a high-ranking official. Now, if you're a low-ranking person and you don't have as much authority, then you can have family members working at the regional center. It is what we're trying to get at here is that there has historically been many executive directors or associate executive directors of regional centers who have hired their spouses, their children, their siblings to have high-ranking positions in both the regional center and in the foundations that support the regional center. And it becomes a really major conflict of interest, especially when it's the agency that owns the building that the regional center works in. So this will prohibit that practice. It's not widespread, by the way. It doesn't happen at every regional center, but it happens at enough of them where it has been a concern expressed by us and many others. So I hope that, but not service providers. So it's not like if you're an executive director of a regional center and your spouse is now owns a service provider agency, that is actually allowed. However, when it comes to signing the contract, having a contract with that service provider agency, already under existing law, the executive director cannot participate in any negotiation of that contract.
Excellent. Okay, so now two people were kind of on the same page, and you're going to love this one. It was both Christina and Robin, right around 4:59 p.m., wanted to know what prompt meant. What are the specific time limits? And that was in reference to the once the spending plan is agreed upon, getting the information and the authorizations over to the financial management service.
Yeah, so that is an excellent question, and I don't have a specific answer for you. Here's what I would say is if we gave a very specific number of days, like if we said they must do it within 5 days or 7 days or whatever, then the Department of Developmental Services or the regional centers would tack on a really extreme cost onto the bill, which would make it very difficult to get passed. So we were kind of generically using the term promptly for them to understand that, like, 30 days is not prompt. 14 days really isn't even prompt. So it's a little bit squishy, and we understand that, but we had to use that term to get this bill passed.
Aisha, hi, how are you doing? Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good. It's so good to see you. Prosperity, my daughter, just got into the dorms at Cal State Fullerton. And about a year ago, I found a document that said that that the regional center I found something that supported on-campus living for people with developmental disabilities, and I've lost the paper, and I wanted to ask you, do you know like what the service code would be or how I would argue that for her to be able to go to live in the dorms?
So when they talk about on-campus supports, they won't pay for the housing itself because regional center won't pay for housing. But it could be if she needs support staff or somebody else to be there with her, or think about anything around living independently that she would need support with. So those are the things that could be covered. And then depending what it is would be what code it would be under. Oh, you're muted.
I found something like that had something under college, under residential living. I don't remember the term for associated with people with developmental disabilities, but you're saying that there's no way that we would be able to.
So there's a couple programs that I know of where it's an actual kind of like a separate, it's not related to the college, but it's a program that has the living as part of the overall project. And with that one, it has even been dependent on what regional center, whether they'll cover the whole thing or whether they'll cover the part without the living expense. So housing has always been one of those things. Housing and food are the two things that generally they do not pay for. And I say generally because there's exceptions all the time, but when it comes to like they're not going to pay for a dorm, they're not going to pay for those kind of things. But again, any support she needs to be there, they can cover.
Okay.
So our next question is from Aparna at 502. What is being done to hold regional centers accountable for timely payment and for reimbursing FMSs?
So that already exists in directives that were issued in the past year, and I don't know if anybody can scramble to find those directives, but those directives, and it's actually in statute currently, that regional centers must pay semi-monthly the FMSs. So twice a month they should be cutting checks to FMSs. So if FMSs are not getting paid in a timely way, meaning every couple of weeks from their regional center, they should be filing a complaint with DDS, the Department of Developmental Services, because that means that regional center is breaking the law. So that we didn't have to cover that in this bill because it's already law.
Whether they do it or not is always a whole nother. But then that gets into oversight.
Right.
So Lisa Walker at 522 asked, when is the last day to call? I think you might have answered that. Did you already answer that? Okay, good. And then Laxmi at 522 said, can I call, but I'm in Virginia. I'm not in California.
Anybody can call, but I just wouldn't volunteer that you're not a California resident, because the governor pretty much only cares about what people, citizens of California. When I say citizens, I don't mean US citizens. I mean residents of California care about. So it's probably not a great idea to call if you're in another state.
Aaron, go ahead and unmute.
Hey, thank you so much for all this information. I was wanted to follow up on the slide where you said spending plan, you can put the description of the service, but you don't have to put the name. So I just want to clarify on if that's currently a law or if that's in one of the bills that we're waiting to pass, and just get a little more clarification on that. So I guess the first question would be, is the timing of that being effective? And then the second one is, so let's say I'm writing my spending plan and I say, I want my son to try rock climbing. I don't know what rock climbing gym I want to use yet. I just put rock climbing, and then later in the year, I can tell my FMS, oh, okay, we're gonna use this. Do I have to then take the spending plan back, put in the specific name of the gym and have that be approved? Or I just tell my FMS this is aligned with the rock climbing?
So, you're the exact reason this was put in there. It sounds like you're having problems with your either regional center or financial management service requiring it. So it is currently in the FAQs, the frequently asked questions on the DDS site, which means it is required for them to follow those because it's on the DDS site. But they're not following it, and that's why we're putting it in the bill. We're what they call codifying it. We're making it law, and to make, insist that they follow this. So you're correct. You should be able to put a description of rock climbing and not the specific one. And if this becomes the law, then it would they would not be able to make you go and update your spending plan and all of those things and send it back to the regional center because you've already had a description. They've already verified it. And so then you're good. Timing wise, that's a great question. Judy, do you want to tell them if we all make our phone calls and send our letters, when would this happen?
So it depends on the provision of the bill. Generally, bills that get passed become effective on the 1st of January of the following year. So many of the provisions of all of these bills will go into effect on January 1st, 2025. But there are exceptions. For example, when it's named specifically in the bill, a different enactment date or a different start date, then it's always later. It's never really earlier than January 1st. So, for example, the Public Records Act would not go into effect for regional centers until January 1st, 2026. So it gives them about a year and a half or a year and 4 months to be able to get prepared to answer requests that might come their way. There are other provisions in there. For example, in the Self-Determination bill, the SB 1281, we have a later start date for those. I believe it's, Nina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's also January 1st, 2026, to create those. Is that right?
Standardized processes. Yes,
Right.
that's exactly right.
So the standard
Yes.
processes that we're requiring in the bill around enrollment, FMSs, spending plans, they have until January 1st, 2026 to make that happen as well. So in some cases, it'll be the end of this year, and in other cases, it'll be later.
So our next question is from Kay Howard at 509. What's helped families when the child is nonverbal? PDA, so participation of client is hard to advocate for. In self-determination, does the family need to conserve or get a POA? Thank you. Judy, do you want to take the...
Yes, so absolutely, there is no requirement that an adult becomes conserved. In fact, in the view of Disability Voices United, conservatorship is a little bit contradictory to somebody living a self-determined life. But people who are conserved can also be in the self-determination program, but they still must have person-centered planning in order to determine the services and supports that they want to receive and their goals and hopes and dreams. It's not a conservator-centered plan. So the conservator cannot have a person-centered plan that says, okay, this is what I want for my kid, and this is all the stuff that he's going to do all day. That's not the way person-centered planning works, regardless of whether the individual is conserved or not. But certainly within, there is certainly no requirement to have a person conserved. And I believe that regardless of the individual's support needs, that they can certainly express their preferences. And even if they can't articulate the preferences through spoken words, they can express it through sign language, through typing, through gestures, through getting pissed off when you're forcing them to go to an activity that they don't want to go to. That behavior is communication. So That is how you figure out people's preferences and desires.
Mariana, do you want to unmute?
Hello, everyone, and thank you again for everything that you guys are currently doing. It's amazing the work that you guys do and continue to learn about this SDP program. However, it's been about 9 months close since I've been trying to get my sister with the severe cerebral palsy into self-determination. And so as I continue to learn more about SDP, one of the questions that I have is, once we have her in this program, the providers that would provide the service, for example, for music or for, let's say music, do they have to have some type of a license? Because I'm currently hearing from other families who have SDP right now that some of the FMSs are asking the providers to have business license. So I'm just asking this question because as I'm planning to hire people, I want to prepare myself ahead of time if this is the case. So that's kind of the question that I had for you guys today.
Well, congratulations on being so close. Yay. And I will tell you, just so you know, that 9 months is about what it's taking people to get in. So don't feel like you're behind. And Fernando's shaking his head. It's way too long. I know it's too long. So, and as far as asking for licenses, for specific things, the financial management service might need to know if they have a license. So what this entails, there are specific things that if somebody said that they are a speech therapist, in order for the financial management service to pay for them, they have specific licensure requirements to be a speech therapist. So if you put them in your, plan as a speech therapist, then they would have to have that kind of licensure. I do know some of the FMSs have gone a little extreme with this, and they are asking for licenses for everything. And the interesting thing is some cities don't even require licenses for like a piano teacher or, so those kind of things. And all they have to do is send a screenshot of the city saying, we don't require licenses. I know it's a hassle. It is something that we are working on and trying to, again, that gets into let's have some consistent rules across the board with all the financial management services so we're not running into these kind of things. But that is the type of license. So there are certain cases where they might need a license, and then there are cases where they're asking, but they don't really need them. So I hope that answers your question. Catherine at 510 asked, with SDP, what does it take for regional center to accept funding a more specialized therapy over a generic therapy? Example, PT for neurodiverse individuals is found at specialized centers versus sports injury PT found on every other street corner. So this is kind of, it's a twofold question. So if you are interested in getting a therapy like physical therapy, depending on their age, if they are at school age, then the school district would be responsible for it first. And then your insurance would be responsible for it. Should you get past both of those, they've both given you denials, then you could potentially ask for them to increase your budget to pay for this. So this is on the budget side when you're building your budget. If you're saying specialized therapy, you can, so I hate to say no, because sometimes regional centers surprise you. It never hurts to ask. Always ask them, I'm interested in this therapy. Will you cover it? It is, medically based. It has, it's therapeutic. Even if they don't put it in your budget, if it's something that could be covered in self-determination program, then you can put it in your spending plan. So look at the things, look at all the services that are available in self-determination, because there's a lot more services in self-determination than are available in the traditional system. There is still the same rule. It has to be an evidence-based therapy. So you can't pay for non-evidence-based therapy in either, and so they might kick it back in the spending plan, but you will definitely have more options. Also, think about what you're calling it. Sometimes, as Judy was talking about earlier, and behavior, maybe it's not behavior therapy. Maybe you're going to use horseback riding. Maybe going to the pool and swimming laps after school every day really helps that person regulate. And that's what they're going to use for their behavior support. And they have somebody that takes them to the pool and helps them, be safe in the pool and all those kind of things. So, you can be very creative in what type of um, services you're going to use to meet your goals. So I hope that answered your question. Valdemitra, how are you doing? Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, Christina. Nice to see you guys. Quick question. Going back to the license for different vendors. Now, what if you have been they've accepted it and all of a sudden the FMS wants to change. Now all of a sudden they want a license, but not for everybody, just want for one specific because they have an issue. I mean, who is the one that has the final say? Is it the FMS or is it the regional center?
Huh. And Judy, jump in if I'm wrong, but as far as I understand, it is the financial management service that is responsible for verifying that somebody has the correct licensure. So I would believe they would have the final say. If if you're having problems with one, then you don't believe it should be something that needs to be licensed. This again is something where you can contact the ombudsperson's office and they can talk to your financial management service and you can kind of work it together. Go ahead, you can unmute again.
That's the whole issue. I had to go to the ombudsman in reference to this situation in this FMS. So they become extremely upset about that. So they're picking in every little thing. Now, I don't know whether the ombudsman is on them. I don't know what's going on with that. But picking at little things when prior to this, there was no issue. So.
Yeah, so the way that authority works in the system is the FMSs are here, regional centers are here, and DDS is here, which includes the ombudsperson's office. So an FMS does have the authority to decide on licensing issues, but a regional center could come in and overrule them. And then a regional center could make a decision and DDS could come in and overrule the regional center. So, it's always good to try to get the ombudsperson office on your side. They don't solve every problem, and sometimes they don't even return your freaking phone calls. So they're certainly not the answer for everyone. They have been able to help people in the past in some cases. So I always encourage people to reach out to the ombudsperson's office because you might be one of those people that they help. But this is where our laws are so important. Our bills are so important because there has to be consistency and more definition from the state, from DDS, about these kinds of issues. It can't be, well, I never had a problem before and now all of a sudden I'm having a problem. Like, it should not work like that. It should be people understand what the rules are. The rules are clear. And everybody's following exactly the same rules. So, and if somebody like one regional center is interpreting the rules differently, then DDS needs to come in and get down on that regional center to say, stop it, do it this way. So it's, and it's the same thing where we need to understand the rules as participants and family members of the SDP. We need to understand so that we don't get into trouble. And they're doing a terrible job of telling us what the rules are, because either there are no rules or the rules are confusing or they're changing the rules in the middle of the game. So there needs to be more clarity. And that is why we need to get this bill signed by the governor.
I'd also add that the financial management services are contracted with the regional center. So the regional centers do have some authority over them. So if you feel like there's retaliation or anything like that, then I would tell your regional center, because they are the contractors of them. They are their vendor responsibility. So that's another direction you can go to to get support. So, hold on. Christina asked, after the bill is passed, will you advocate for DDS to provide clarity around what prompt means? Oh, and this is an interesting question. So there is already a directive that says that regional centers must, as soon as a spending plan is approved, they must notify the financial management service. The problem is within 3 days. The problem is notify doesn't mean send over, authorizations. So it doesn't matter to us if they call the FMS and say, hey, we have a new spending plan. That doesn't help us. So that's why we wanted to add in, not only do they need to notify, they need to send the authorizations. And then what I'm hoping is going to happen then is that DDS will do the directive and say, here's your time limit. They'll do the more specific times and yeah, we will probably start advocating. Again, also in 1281 is creating looking at the systems, creating standardized systems and getting them in place. And so I'm assuming that in there, we're also going to be able to get some timelines, and that is our goal.
Christiana, just one thing I wanted to expand on that in every one of these elements that we're trying to define, I think it's also important to say that it has to also come with accountability. Because you're right, you can respond, but if that response doesn't maintain some type of accountability to, in good faith, push forward, then everybody's spinning wheels. So that's an additional element that we're all very sensitive to and are looking to make sure it's applicable.
Exactly. So I think this is such a great question that David asked at 5:39. What forces and issues are working against passage of these bills?
Fernando, you can help me answer this one. And Nina. Oh, there are so many forces. So let's start with which bill? Let's start with AB 1147. So let's talk about the incredible amount of groups that are already supporting the bill. And they are very diverse. They are everything. I have it actually up on my screen. They are groups like the Alameda County Board of Supervisors, which is
my county.
Yay. They are groups like the California News Publishers Association, which is every single newspaper in the state of California, their trade association, because they want the Public Records Act. Let's talk about Disability Rights California and groups like Parents Helping Parents and Prognia in Northern California, Public Counsel, which is a great legal organization, the Special Needs Network in South LA, and the Yurok tribe, which is the largest Native American tribe in the state of California. So we have this really, really large group, and you can tell who supports and opposes a bill by going on I'll put it in the chat when I'm done, the Legium to a website, and look at the analysis of the bill, and they have supporters. But if you look at the opposition of 1147.
Also, Judy, the Little Hoover Commission itself supports AB 1147.
Thank you for reminding me of that. The Little Hoover Commission also supports SB 1281 as well. But if you look at opposition to 1147, there's only one organization listed, and it's the Association of Regional Center Agencies. One.
They put a price tag for the PRA of over $9 billion or something like that.
$9 million.
A year.
So I don't know if you want to provide any color commentary to that, Fernando.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think it really talks to, where is the speed bump in this whole system? And it really just points down to the Association of Regional Center Agencies, or also known as ARCA, which is the association that represents the interests of all 21 regional centers, which is really the one that's going to be the most impacted. And here again, a way in order to kill a bill like 1147 would be to put such a high cost to it that it would really not be able to pass. Of course, that has to be justifiable. So you can throw all those numbers out there, like Nina said, it's over $9 million a year, but it has to be justifiable, and it would be. But we don't believe it's going to cost anywhere near that amount. So anytime that you're advocating in this type of environment, like with a PRA, you're going against culture, established culture. So of course they're not going to really take that laying down, and they're going to push back. But we think that through everyone that Judy shared and others, that would be enough momentum to get us push that over that little hump that we're talking about and get it approved.
So David asked a follow-up question in the chat, which is, what are ARCA's objections to the bill? ARCA's objections to the bill are they feel like it will cost them so much money because everybody will come in from out of the woodwork to request information from them. But folks should know that with the Public Records Act, you are the requester of information. If they are asking for information that's not normally kept by the department or the agency, they have to pay for that information. And so, for example, if you're just asking for, like, give me the number of employees at the regional center, which is like something that they should be able to get pretty quickly, that they should just give that to you for free. If you're asking for a really in-depth analysis of intense data, they may request several $100s to get that information. So you should know that there has been an analysis of the $9 million a year that ARCA has said it will cost them, and that analysis has been rejected by both the Senate and the Assembly Appropriations Committee. So that has been completely rejected. So
Yeah,
we're hoping that the governor also rejects that and that he will sign it. I have a quick mention. I know we have to end in 2 minutes, but Amy has been putting in the chat that there has been some scare tactics being used by certain regional centers to say that your private information is going to get out there. It's just not true. First of all, they're using HIPAA as an excuse, and people should know that regional centers are not subject to HIPAA requirements. They are not healthcare agencies. They do have specific privacy laws they must abide by, but it's not HIPAA. So stop with the HIPAA. But
also there are so many exemptions in the PRA that are reflective of protections. So many privacy and confidentiality things that are in there. Your medical information, it's HIPAA-like. And more. I mean, this is from years. There's years of case law about all these exemptions. There are many, many things that are just, you can't get them through the PRA, but they're the kinds of things like attorney-client privilege, your personal information. It's the kind of things you want. The Public Records Act is a balance between the public's right to know and then your right to confidential information and privacy. And it has struck this balance for years and years and years. And, like Judy said, if you do have a chance, read the Senate Judiciary Bill analysis. It's a beautiful piece of writing because it talks about the thing that is legit. There is a startup cost. That's why there's a year to implement this, an extra year to implement this bill. I worked for the federal government for years, but without the Freedom of Information Act, there would be no, it's what moves public policy along, this information. But it is, there's things to do, there's things to implement, but it is not at the expense of private data. That's for sure.
I'm putting that beautiful Senate Judiciary Committee analysis in the chat.
I think it's important too to talk about the fact that every other agency has Public Record Act. We are the only subsection. So Department of Developmental Services is under Public Records Act. Health and Human Services, all of the others are under it. The regional centers are the only ones that are not. And then I want to ask the question, why? Why are you guys fighting this? Why are you so afraid about public records? That That's what concerns me when I hear this. Why are they specifically fighting this so hard when every other government agency is required to have this? And think about it like the press. The press are the ones who use this and support this the most, I think. So we are right at time. I want to thank everybody so much for being here. Our next Connect is going to be on insurance. I know this is a hot topic everybody's talking about. So we are going to talk all about workers' comp insurance, and hopefully you won't fall asleep and it'll be very engaging. So have a wonderful couple weeks and we will see you soon.